All right,
Yep.
guys, this is me working on my production value.
You're looking good, man. You got the DSLR going, I think, right?
I got a few things. I don't have any idea how a lot of it kind of works. People have been helping me along the way.
Coming in pretty clear. All right, so what are we doing? What are we on?
So, wanted to get you guys together, ask some questions. I did a video earlier with a friend of ours, Greg Rogers, just kind of talking about his testimony. So, how did you guys meet, and how did you guys come to Jesus, and how did that happen?
You want to start?
Well, I had a Christian friend, and he said I was in my, I think it was early 20s. We've known each other pretty
a long time,
over a decade now. But anyway, we were trying to do some sort of local mission work, and you know how it is in these churches. You always have like a small group of people who are like radicals and gung ho, and let's go do something and let's get martyred or whatever. And so they were like, yeah, man. He said, I found a group of people who are exactly like us with that mentality, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, I was I was married, but my wife at the time didn't want me around. And if you've ever hung out in the atheist forums, I guess you could see why. You can't blame her. But anyway, I was like, yeah, man, whatever. So I went to this Bible study, and sure enough, it was a bunch of people my age, but they were all...
Yours truly was running it.
Yeah, Sori was running it. And they were all pretty serious about God, which, at my church at the time, people my age were not very serious about God at all. It was kind of like a cult. They were like right at the end of their cultural Christianity. Like they were, 18, 19, about to move out and about to leave church and never again. So that was kind of where I was at. So it was cool. It was refreshing to find young people my age who really took God seriously and took the faith seriously and took the Bible seriously. And I overlooked the fact that they had a girl running it. And I showed up, and I think Sori overlooked the fact that I was black. So maybe she can explain.
I overlooked the fact that you were reformed.
Well, I didn't come in. I didn't. Unlike a lot of reformed kids at the time,
you were reformed, and Sori was not reformed.
Sori was an Arminian Pentecostal, and I was a reformed Calvinist. Cessationist, no miracles, very skeptical.
Yeah, you were. But your mom, who's probably your favorite person in the entire world, but you just haven't really fully admitted it yet, was not that way. She was, she was more about the giftings and stuff.
My mom was exactly like Sori. They were exactly the same person. My mom was a tongue-talking, fire-breathing, you can lose your salvation, Arminian like Sori. So, but at the time, I really didn't care, because I was just happy to find a group of like-minded young people and people who actually wanted to do something and took the Bible seriously. And so, and a lot of times, for whatever reason, every place I ended up, especially like in a Bible situation, I always ended up being the leader. And so I wanted a little environment. Like I had just preached my first sermon, and after I preached my first sermon at that church, everybody started treating me differently. The few people my age that I hung out with, like they stopped hanging out with me. They didn't want to be around me anymore.
They're like, oh, he's a preacher.
Yeah,
he's not a regular person anymore.
Just wasn't a regular person anymore. And we had been growing apart anyway because they were just not into stuff that I was into. Like I said, I was, I've got a pretty extreme personality. So, if I do something, it goes all the way. And I was just having a hard time relating to people. So anyway, when I ran into that Bible study, it was pretty good for me at the time, because it was an important time in my, spiritual development. And so I just wanted to be there and kind of sit down and shut up and learn from everybody and just be a regular guy for once, because like I said, where I was at my church, there was just a lot of like, oh my God, Vin this, Vin that, blah, blah, blah. And It was cool to go to an environment where nobody really knew me. There was no hype about me. You know, I was just a regular dude, just one of the guys. And so that's how I ran into her. So.
No, that's very cool. So you were preaching, and then was she in the congregation at the time?
No, I was there for one of his sermons though. But I went to another church. And he started coming to the Bible study. And then I caught wind that he was going to be doing like a sermon. And so I was like, oh, you're preaching. I'm going to show up for it. You're like, yeah, don't do that. You remember that?
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like, like the banter that people will do, like if somebody's actually really good at something and they'll be like, oh, I'm like terrible at that, just because they want people to be like, no, you're amazing. I thought that was like the kind of game thing that you were doing. I didn't know anything about you. He legit didn't want me to go to it.
I didn't want anybody to go because, again, my experience was once I started preaching, people kind of like stayed away from me. I was like nuclear. So I found this group of people who like I could finally relate to, and somehow it got out that I was up that Sunday or whatever. And that was actually after the drama had happened.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So there was some drama that happened at our church, and so I got a call from one of the elders. He's like, "Hey man, we need you to preach." Now, like, just for perspective, I hate public speaking. Like I'm by default an introvert. It's one of the reasons I'm an insomniac, because 3 to 6 a.m. I've discovered is like there are no human beings around, so I can kind of charge my battery and whatever, because being around a bunch of people sucks the life out of me. But and public speaking is like the worst. I mean, I failed. It took me 5 years to graduate high school. One of the main reasons is because I couldn't get my elective credit because they had a speaking assignment. They had a 3-minute speaking assignment, and so I just didn't go to the class after that because I wasn't going to do it. So I hate public speaking. It's
so weird to picture that, right, James? Because he talks so much. It's hard to picture that he's like.
I mean, all the videos on YouTube, but I kind of get it. This is different. Like, even though somebody's going to watch it later, maybe a few people watch it live. I can completely feel you, because the first time I stood in front of a pulpit, I asked my wife not to come. I'm like, don't come. They want me to speak on jail ministry. I am going to go up there. I'm so nervous. There was maybe like 25 people in that congregation, and I'm just nervous as all get out. Like, I thought I was going to pick up the pulpit.
Yeah. So I didn't want her or any of them to come, because I didn't want anybody to treat me differently, because just, I don't know what happens, but people get around me. I get this little moment where, like, for a month or two, like, I'm a regular person, and then after that, it just gets very weird. I don't know why, but it happens. It happens in pretty much every phase of my life. So
this is a question I've actually never asked you. Did I get weird with you after I saw you preach? I don't feel like I did.
No. So I preached what I thought was a pretty basic sermon. It was a pretty, run-of-the-mill thing. And so she comes up to me. She's like, "Oh my God, that was great. I remember you were like, you were so clear. You did this
concise,
thing."
You were. Well, it's because I've heard a lot of sermons. I went to a Bible college, and we had to. It was just too much for me, to be honest. It's probably part of my testimony, but. Like, you were required to go to chapel. You were required to go to Sunday morning, Sunday evening church. And it was like, it just felt like somebody like force feeding you. Like, I don't know. It was just too much. And there was some nights where I didn't want to go. I didn't want to learn, and I didn't want to listen, but you had to do it. And it was like absolutely required. I mean, they literally had a watch. And if you were like, the little ticker was just beyond that, boom, you got written up for it. You were in trouble, and you couldn't have that happen more than X amount of times. It was a very, very strict college. So
cult.
Well, yeah. So I heard bunches and bunches of sermons, but I've never heard anybody put a sermon the way he did, because it was very like, he talked about stuff. A lot of times when people are talking about things, they're like kind of feel uncomfortable, maybe to put their worldview out there, to talk about God in like realistic, like, this is what I believe terms. And you talked about like sin and different stuff, but you didn't like fluff it and make it like easier for people to swallow. It was like, look, this is what I'm talking about. And you just laid it out, and you laid it out so clearly. I'd never seen actually anybody do that before. So I was just blown out of the water. And I was like, I always felt like somebody that didn't really fit in because I was always more extreme than everybody else. So I didn't feel weird around you at that point. I was like, oh my word, finally somebody that I can kind of feel normal around.
Yeah. Yeah. It was me, you, and then there was this other kid. Dan. Shout out to Danny boy. But yeah, like, so that's how we met, and we were friends ever since then. And you know, like, I always admired Sori. Like, her spirituality was the most authentic spirituality I've seen since my mom, which, if anybody knows how I am about my mom, that's pretty high praise. But we were just really, really solid friends. I had some interesting jobs that, you know, at times took me out of the state, other times took me out of the country. So like, we always kept in contact. You know, I moved around a lot as a kid. So I was used to like making friends and then, you know, not making friends, seeing people and not seeing people. But she was one person that I always kept in contact with. But anyway, that's the
time would kind of pass without us like talking. But I think that we always had a spiritual connection. So anytime that we would start talking, like it would just go right to the Bible, and we were talking about different ideas or different theories about it and stuff. And so it was always like really cool conversation. I always found the conversation so interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's how me and her met. As far as how, you know, people always ask me that question, and I always say there's two answers. So the dramatic answer to my when I got saved or whatever.
Yeah, I can see two answers there.
Is my mom, it was me, my mom, my older brother, my younger brother. We all packed to the car, and we were going to Blockbuster. And I remember very clearly we were going to rent Karate Kid and Ninja Gaiden on Nintendo. So we took turns sitting in the front seat, and you know, to this day, my older brother incorrectly says it was his turn. It was my turn. It was my turn, and we got into a little fight. Surprise, surprise! Vincent getting a fight with somebody.
I don't believe it.
And my mom said, "You know what? Both of you, everybody get in the back." So my brother looks at me. He's like, "I'm gonna kill you," and we all get in the back. And sure enough, you know, we're driving and we get knocked into the parallel lane. And then there's a big 16-wheeler. Like, every time I tell the story, I can still see it. As a matter of fact, I was talking to my little brother about this. Yeah. And we've both been extremely traumatized by this event, but we didn't know that we were. But anyway, so we get knocked into the other lane. And then here comes this big, you know, 18-wheeler, 16-wheeler, whatever whatever. And I, to this moment, can see it like coming straight for us. I'm 8 years old at the time, so I've seen enough movies to know that if you get in a big accident like that, there's going to be a big explosion, and then you're going to walk off in slow motion and everybody's going to be okay. So I was educated enough as an 8-year-old to know that I was going to be fine. This was going to be a wonderful adventure. My mother, for some strange reason, thought we were going to die. So she literally takes her hands off the wheel and says, "We're coming home, Lord." Like, I remember my mom saying that right before impact. And so she gets her hands off the wheel. My older brother, who's in the back seat.
That's so bad.
The older brother who's in the back seat jumps up. He says, "No." He jumps up and he twists the car.
He was young. He was how old?
He was 8, 11, 12.
He was 11 or 12 years old. He grabbed the wheel and got them to safety.
Yeah, my older,
like, when you think about it, like a child that has no concept, you'd think they would jerk the wheel so much that it would have just flipped that vehicle.
My older brother
made the accident worse.
My older brother. I mean, he's doing some pretty incredible stuff in the world right now. So
shout out to him.
He's just a very incredible guy. He's definitely a 1%er, as we say in some of our communities. So, you know, it was a pretty crazy situation. And so I was right, though. We got hit. We kind of got jostled around a couple times, and then EMT showed up and all this. My stepfather
Oh my God.
was on the other side of the street, saw the whole thing happen. He was certain that he just saw his entire family just die. He was certain, because it turns out we got hit like 3 or 4 times, and then the big one hit us, the 18-wheeler or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, they're getting us out. My mom was conscious but not really lucid. The 3 of us were fine. Like, I literally didn't have a scratch, no whiplash, nothing. I mean, I had worse times, on my bike, jumping over bridges and stuff and hurting myself than that massive traumatic car accident. So, I just remember everything was fine to me. I mean, they put my mom on a stretcher. I thought that was weird. I'm like, we're good, whatever. I still wasn't processing it. And it finally hit me as I was we were getting loaded into our stepdad's car, because he came over. And I heard when the EMT said, whoa, good thing nobody was in that front seat, because they would have been dead. And I just thought to myself, dead? I'm like, what? And I looked, and sure enough, the front seat where I was supposed to be, because if justice would have been served, I would have been, in my rightful place. And it just like really, it kind of freaked me out as a kid. It was the first time I had to really, reconcile myself to my own mortality. And it had a massive impact on me. And so, I mean, I went home, I played Ninja Gaiden. My mother was basically my pastor. So I had to wait till she got out of the hospital, which was a long time. She was never the same after that. She pretty much died that day to some degree. But I said, Mom, what would have happened if I was in the seat I was supposed to be in? And she said, you'd have went to heaven, honey. And I said, well, how do you know? Because I told her, I was like, I do bad things. Because I'm the middle child, I was I was your stereotypical middle child. I was a bad kid, to this day, I'm like my mother's worst kid. So I was like, are you sure? So she goes over the gospel with me. Jesus died for your sins. Like, he died for you punching your brother in the eye and, stealing the candy and all that. And, breaking your curfew or when you're grounded or whatever. He died for all of that. And if you believe in him, yada, yada, yada. So I prayed with her that night. And so when people ask me that question, that's usually the answer I give them. But there were things that happened well before that, which to me solidified my relationship with God. But that story is just, it's too woo-woo. It's too esoteric and weird and, Lord of the Rings-ish. So I generally don't tell that story, because that story happened 5 years previous when I was around 2.5, 3 years old. I don't tell that story. So I usually tell the other one because, it's verifiable. There are witnesses there. Me and my older brother, we've talked about it. We talked about my little brother. The medical records are there. We walked out without a scratch. My mother had massive traumatic brain injury, but the rest of us walked out literally without a scratch, whiplash, nothing. And so I just stick with that story. So that's what I tell people. I don't know what you tell people. Well, I do have an idea what you tell people.
This is like a test to see how well you know her.
Yeah. For me, like as far back as I can remember, so like some difficult things happened to me when I was extremely young. And when I was in that tough environment, that was the first time that I guess you could say, like, I think I always felt like I had an understanding and a knowledge of God, but as much as you can have as a child. But in that difficult spot, I guess you could say, of my life, that's where I really felt like God came to me, and I really began to rely on needing him to, I guess you could say, survive in a sense. And then it was almost like a familiar friend that I knew the rest of my life. But the thing is with God, and the more that you read the Bible, the more you'll see these things. He comes in different forms. And so sometimes he's like quiet, and sometimes he's like this raging storm. And sometimes it's like, he's a warrior. And then sometimes he's gentle, like a mother hen pulling in her little baby chicks. Like it all, depends. And it kind of reminds me like being a mother sometimes where you know, you're like, you kids, you know, you decide. But then there are other times where you're like, come here, let me hold you, you know?
Yeah.
And God is like that. Like he's very versatile and he comes to us in the form, you know, that we need at the moment. So there's some times where we need his comfort and there's other times where we need him to be like, all right, you gotta go now, you know? And so when I first, like, I guess you could say met him was, he just came in the exact form that I needed him in. And it got me through some extremely difficult things. So from that time forward and for the rest of my life, it was just someone that I really knew that I 100% could rely on. And, but then I kind of hit my teen years and then I started thinking like, wait a minute, like maybe this experience that I've had isn't really an experience. Maybe it's only something that I have because I have parents who are religious. And that's when I started like kind of questioning everything. And my uncle at the time was studying to be a pastor. And he was going to pastor his church. So I thought, perfect. He's the guy to ask. And so I asked him. For the life of me, I can't remember what question I asked. I just remember what answer I got. So I asked him a question. It was, you know, relevant to the Bible. And his answer didn't satisfy me. It wasn't enough. And so I questioned it more. Normally, I wouldn't continue, like, I guess you could say, badgering somebody with questions that they don't have the answer to. But I thought, well, he should have the answer. And I was at that point where I was kind of like at a crossroad where I was like, is this real? Like, what if I would have been born into a Buddhist family? Or what if I would have, you know, been born into Islam? Like, would I have believed in that way rather than this way? Or do I know this way because this is the truth? So, you know, I kept asking him more questions because I actually thought it was like a safe environment to ask questions because he was like a Bible person. But then he seemed like he got really agitated and he said, you know what, Sori, you know, sometimes you just need to take stuff by faith. And I actually had never seen my uncle get like agitated before because he always was very like, you know, nice to us and blah. So that was kind of confusing to me. And that to me was like, well, no. I'm not good with that. I just said okay to him. I was like, okay, yeah. But then I like backed away and then I just kept thinking about that. I'm like, this is not good. This is not good that you have to just like right at the beginning, you're getting all edgy and you're saying take it by faith. That's not enough for me. And I'm not going to basically throw away my entire life to follow some belief system that really has no basis. And so I really was like, I was working at the time. And so a lot of my time when I was working, I was thinking through the things that I learned and kind of thinking through what things I didn't agree with. Because
you had just came back from that college.
No. That was before the college.
Oh, okay.
I was really young. I was probably like 13. So then I was like, all right, you know what? I decided that what I was going to do was go all in. I'm like, you can't know for sure unless you just go all in. So I'm like, I'm going to dive into this Christianity stuff and see where it brings me. And that's when I decided I was going to go to Bible college. And I'm like, if I end Bible college and I have no more faith, because I'm like, they must know where my uncle didn't know, they must know. So unfortunately, when I got there, the environment was, I'm sure that as
mega toxic.
It was toxic. Yeah. And I'm sure that as I grow older, I'll understand more of why I spent time there, but it took out a lot of time of my life, a couple years. And it wasn't like a good environment. And but I will say, strange as it seems, in that environment, it was super controlling. Like I got a lot of negative from there, but it was where I'm probably getting emotional. We had all of this land. We had like all this land there, like just acres and acres of land. And you could just go out into these fields and just like spend time with God. And I'm trying to like, because this is actually the first time I've kind of shared some of this stuff. So I'm like, not sure how much to say, but I've always had like a very good connection with like nature. Nature makes me feel like
yeah, you've always been a pagan like that.
Yeah. Some people say a pagan. Like basically, like my dad is a woodworker. So there's times where like I'll go into his shop and I smell the wood and I smell that stuff and it's like super familiar. And I'm like, oh, I love my dad. And like that to me is nature. So when I go out in nature, it's like, okay, like God created all of this. And like his fingerprints are all over it. And it's like living and it's like moving and the wind is coming through it. And it's just a great environment, especially in Maine. Like our winters suck, but there are some really pretty days even in the winter. And like as the seasons change, there's just things that you can learn about God that's different from having an environment where the season stays the same. So anyway, like I just had time in those fields. And when I was in those fields, just like praying and reading my Bible, I still had so many questions, but the voice that I heard was the same voice from back when I was very, very little. And so from that, I was like, okay, I'm still a little bit confused on some of the stuff I'm reading in the Bible. I'm confused on some of these questions that I have because I had nobody I could ask those hard questions to, because even there, they were not good with certain questions. So, but I was like, I know that voice. That's basically what I got from it. So like that college was like, it was not necessarily a good environment, but from that environment, I was like, I know that voice. And then I was convinced, okay, God is real. There's a lot of questions I still have, but I'm with him. And then when I came back, that's when I started the Bible study. It was like, I just really didn't know. I was kind of just spinning my wheels. I didn't know what to do. There was no Bible study. I was trying to find a Bible study to go to, and there was like nothing for people my age. I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'll just start one. And so then I started one, and then Vinny showed up. He's right. I was a bit racist. I didn't know I was. I wasn't sure if he was going to come back and rob my parents' house. Really, I was a little bit racist.
Now, granted, I showed up with a pick in my hair.
Yeah, he had a big afro, pick in his hair.
I had a fro, I had a pick in the hair.
Pants.
I wore my rocker pants, my raver pants. Like, I was like, I'm going to present myself as like far away from possible as, oh, this is a guy that you'd put in your pulpit. Right. I just wanted to be like a regular guy.
And so there was like one time where I was like, I don't think that this guy is a Christian, because he was so quiet and his appearance and stuff. I was like, I don't think he's a Christian.
Also, I was black.
Stop, babe. I didn't think you weren't a Christian because you were black. That's ridiculous. So anyway, he comes to the Bible study, and I decide I need to find out if this guy's a Christian.
She starts interrogating,
asking him what's your testimony.
See, when you're black in these all white areas, you begin to feel very quickly that certain people are just, their eyes are on you for the entire time. They're watching every move that you make.
Every time you say these lines, I keep hearing the song. Every move
you make. Yeah.
Anyways,
so she was grilling me like from day one, and I was like, okay, here we go.
Kind of curious about him.
Here we go.
And then anyway, so turns out he was a Christian, but when he answered and said his testimony, which actually I think you made really super short, but from his testimony, like I heard some like really clear gospel. I heard clarity of scripture that I had never heard in my life, even through all the time in the Bible colleges, all the pastors, all the sermons, all of it. Never heard anything that clear. And then I was like, wait a minute. And then as I started talking to him, there was one thing that I was like, okay, this guy is unafraid. He was unafraid of any questions, I knew that like there was no topic that was off the table. And so I began just asking all these, like obviously not during the Bible study, because that would have wrecked my credibility with teaching these people. But like when everybody was dispersed.
I think reading John 17, 1-8, and then saying we're going to skip verse 9 and keep going.
I didn't know what to do with that.
I think that wasn't very good for your credibility either.
It wasn't, but I wasn't going to lie to anybody. I was like,
John 17:9 is where Jesus says, I pray for them. I'm not praying for the world, but for those you've given me.
I was a little bit confused why Jesus wasn't going to pray for everybody.
She was an Arminian at the time, so there was no way for her to reconcile.
There was nothing, literally nothing I could do with that.
So she just decided she was going to skip it.
So I did.
Okay.
I said, we're just going to skip over this one and keep going to the next. So,
and you looked at me. And then I looked at Danny, and Danny looked at me and went, what are you going to do, bro?
So anyway, but I started like picking his brain, like after the studies, like asking him all these questions. And my mom is like me, where she was like, she has these questions she wants to talk about, but there's no space. And so Vinny was like the Bible answer man for us after the studies would finish. But it wasn't.
I mean, full disclosure, Vinny took 5 years to graduate high school and hadn't spent a day in Bible college. So
it doesn't matter.
Let's just level the field out here so these poor people don't leave with the impression that I'm some Bible. Whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's just put a ton of time into studying, and his mind is very logical and puts things in a certain order that's easy to understand. And so he was just answering all these questions, and we were digging more into stuff. And like, I was like, it was super exciting to me because it was like the God that I always knew all my life. I was now seeing more things in the Bible that were making sense and were fitting in with what I had always known about God. So it was a really, really, really cool thing. And yeah, I guess that's what I would say about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if that answered.
Did you feel like you were? You can be honest. Did you feel like you were being used, or did you feel like you were hanging out with friends?
No, I didn't feel used. I was just kind of like.
You felt like you were being put in that spot again.
I don't know why that keeps happening. So,
well, honey, you have a lot of knowledge.
I was. I don't know if frustrated was a term, but I was kind of. You know, it took me a while to kind of accept, like, look, man, that's how people are going to treat you. It is what it is. You know.
I didn't, but I didn't feel like some people. I feel like just they fall at your feet and begin to worship you or something. It's kind of ridiculous. But I didn't feel like that because I felt like you had some shortcomings too because you were not about the gifts. So like I was like, this guy's got so much knowledge, but feels he needs more heart.
I think anybody who hangs out with me for 10 minutes can see pretty quickly like the obvious flaws. I mean, the first time I talked to James, he hung up on me.
I was actually an atheist at the time. I think the majority of my viewing audience is still atheist on Facebook. I think we were arguing about something, and I didn't like the point you had made. And I think I called you a 4-letter word, and I may have hung up, and that may have been our first interaction.
That may have been. Yeah, it may or may not.
Part of this stuff. It's one of the reasons why I'm not in certain forums anymore because I had to heart check myself over the new year. But some of this to me is like people take stuff personal. It's kind of like, Tom Brady, like if you see him in an interview, I was watching an 18-minute interview with Tom Brady yesterday. He was so nice. He was so sweet.
Yeah.
Great dude. And then you look at him at the Super Bowl and he's going after people, yelling at people, running people down, going, yeah, mother, blah, 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 blah. And it's like that. Like I recognize that like debate many times is almost like a sport to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm generally pretty decent at it. And so I like difficult questions and I like mm-hmm. things that I haven't thought about before. And I like, engaging in those types of things, but I also like the competitive aspect of debate. And it's a curse because there are times like you've been there. There are times when like I'm in an argument with an atheist or whatever, and I'll tell Sori, okay, he's going to bring up this, and this now. And then,
it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the first time we hung out with Justin, mm-hmm. and it was a conversation about abortion, and Justin goes, okay, we're going to go to the Bible. So I lean over to Sori. I'm like, he's going to go to Numbers 5, guaranteed. I bet you my life. And then Justin goes, all right, Numbers chapter 5.
Yo!
So I think like that's a gift, obviously, but it's also a curse in the sense that, I'm Paul talks about we destroy arguments and, anything that sets itself up about the knowledge of Christ or whatever. And like
against the knowledge of Christ.
So to me, I'm like, I'm going to destroy this argument. But you end up, people take it personally, especially in, I don't know how to say this without offending people, but like the modern atheist is not a guy who is extremely well-read. There have been so many times I've quoted Bertrand Russell or Nietzsche or something like that, and they'll say, oh, that's Christian apologetics. I'm like, that's Bertrand Russell, you idiot. So my point is that like there are times when like, because I review a lot of stuff that I do because I'm trying to critique myself. And there are times when I'm like, okay, like I can see what's happening. The guy made a statement. He completely set himself up. I know 4 moves down the line, I'm going to like completely destroy this guy because he just said X. And I watch myself, and it's kind of like a predatory, almost like I'm going after this guy type of thing. And then it becomes about your ego and all the rest of it. Then you make the guy look silly, and you make him look silly, and then there's a big LOL battle. Everybody starts laughing at each other because now you made the guy feel insecure about himself or whatever. You just embarrassed him. And, the stereotypes is that the Christians are not very intelligent. The atheists are the intelligent, logical ones. And then you show up and you're quoting all the science and da-da-da-da-da. And then, I've seen so many videos where I'm like, what's going on? You don't know? You can't answer the question. What's going on? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, and it's like all that stuff is like, like a ring in a pig's nose or whatever, in Proverbs where it says, beauty.
That's primarily why, like, I don't debate at all. I just have conversations because a conversation, I can reason with you and you can reason with me and we can have good back and forths. I host some debates though. I have an hour-long debate format on this channel that's been pretty interesting. Because, you know, some debates will be like 3 hours and the debaters are repeating themselves. I do almost like a shotgun style of debate night. Like it's
nice.
It's fast.
Yeah. And I've done, you know, when you actually have moderated structured debates, I do very well with that. Like I you know, as far as what I know, like there's not a lot of ego, and you just stay on topic, and you don't go after the person, you go after their idea. It's more the, you know, and I've had a couple of them, you know, had one with Jermaine on abortion, had one with Kat on sex work, and then I had one with another guy in the forum about who the subject of Isaiah 53 was. Those went really, really good. I'm very proud of those. Those are things that I would share to other people. But you know, you're right. Like the free form debates that go on for 3 and 4 hours, where the guy is just, you know, it's all about saving their ego because they don't know me. Like I notice, like a lot of people that do know me and know who I am don't get in the, you know, whatever. But like there'll be some random person who doesn't know who I am and jumps on there, and then, you know, they make a mistake and then they get, you know, excoriated for it. And then the next 20 minutes is just them trying to recoup their ego. And I didn't do a very good job of protecting the guy's ego from himself either. I had a conversation with somebody, he's a deist, and we had a really, really good conversation about epistemology, and it was a very good back and forth. And it was, I'm like, okay, if I could have every conversation like that one, I'd be we would probably be like 9,000 extra Christians in the kingdom now.
Right.
I've probably like propelled about 89. Yeah, James had a little period where he's going back and forth. If I wasn't such a dick, I'm sure that period would have been like cut in half.
I still get that, and I'll say this and then give you guys a chance to respond, and then I'll close out the video. But I still get that whole flip-flopping comment, like, James, were you an atheist? Were you a Christian? Were you a deist? And it's like, hey, I had a year of processing, and I just did it a lot more public than most people. But,
and honest. You were a lot more honest too.
I appreciate that. If you guys have anything you want to say in closing, and then I'll let you guys say something, and then we'll wrap it up, and then I'll kick the outro.
I think people are tired of hearing from me.
What? I felt like I just said a whole bunch of stuff.
You did a great job. Yeah, no, I think that, you know, look, like I said, I've done every kind of debate you can do. You know, actual publicly moderated ones that have time limits and rules and things like that. I've also done free form debates, and, you know, I can do an entire hour off the top of my head on apologetic reasons for why I'm a Christian. But at the end of the day, you know, it's for me, it's to leave what people call Christianity to me would be to turn my back on the best friend that I've ever had in my entire life. Like, it's not, there's a belief system that gets attached with it, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, for me, it's just, and you're right, it's that familiarity that's been with me my entire conscious life. Like I said, I have 2 quote unquote conversion experiences. But, you know, for me, it's just been a unavoidable principle of reality in my conscious life. And, you know, I say all the time, like, I had a very flimsy failed attempt at apostasy in my high school years where, you know, I didn't know much about metal music, but I thought Marilyn Manson was as dark as you could get. So, you know, I was listening to a bunch of Marilyn Manson and painting my nails black and all the rest of it, which is fine. But I was saying there was no God and all this other shit. And then I would go up to my room and listen to hours of John MacArthur and other people very quietly, though, because I didn't want to give my mom any hope. So, you know, it's just something to me that, like, would be impossible for me to do. Like, there's nothing that could happen. And, you know, it's kind of like like, I'm with Sori, and if somebody were to say to me, is there anything I could show you to make you leave Sori? Like, There would be nothing that you could show me. There's no mathematical equation that would like, you know. So it's kind of like that. It's like Jesus has been my best and most consistent friend my entire conscious life. And that's just, you know.
I don't think we can end a video on any better note than that.
There you
kick
go.
this outro and then we'll chat for a minute after.
Cool.